Hey guys, Golf Nerd here. I wanted to make a video to show the installation of the hitting strip in my simulator. I hadn't done this before. I did get some tips online and I thought this might make a helpful video for somebody in the future that's putting in a hitting strip for their first time. So stick around for the entire video and I'll show you every step that I went through in the process of putting this hitting strip into this simulator. The one thing I don't really talk about when I'm going through each of the steps is how important it is to have a good laser available. It's just super helpful whenever you're putting together a simulator, but for a situation like this where you're trying to get it on center line and you're trying to make sure it's exactly where you want, having the ability to have that laser chalk line, if you will, just really makes the process that much easier. So I'd highly recommend that you get a laser. I don't really recall where I bought this. I got this years and years ago. But I'll link to something in the description from Amazon. Obviously, you can find them at any big box store as well. But I'd really recommend when you're setting stuff like this up, especially the simulator and getting your projector lined up and just all those little details, that you have a laser handy. So with no further ado, we'll go through the steps of how I installed this particular hitting strip.
So I'm going to be cutting a hitting strip out of my 4x6 mat. So the first thing I did was I used this square, a permanent marker, and I put a scribe line at 12 inches wide, and it'll end up being a 12-inch wide by 4-foot long hitting strip. Then I'm going to use the X-Acto knife and follow that straight edge and cut out the hitting strip. So using the square as a guide down that scribe line that I drew and the X-Acto knife, I ended up with a really nice square cut, which will be helpful. So to get the measurements ready to cut out for the hitting strip, I've got my Mevo Plus there. I've got a laser that's aligned with the camera on the Mevo Plus. I've got a tape measure on the ground showing me where my 8 feet is going to be so that I can know exactly where to cut it out at. And then if you can make this out on the screen, that laser line is going up through the white line of the driving range. And then here I've got the image from the Mevo with the red line for the camera alignment going through that same center line. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the laser line that you can barely see in the video. You can see a little bit more if I come this way. I'm going to use that and measure off of it and determine where the mat needs to go. And then I'm going to mark all 4 corners with nails. So the turf has MP45 on top, 5/8 inch EVA foam underneath, and I'm going to stick a nail into each corner, and then I'm going to use that to mark the outside perimeter of the hitting strip. So now I've got nails at the center line and each of the 4 corners poked through the turf and into the EVA foam. I just used these white trim nails so you could easily see it. And now I'm going to use the straight edge again and cut between each of those nails with the X-Acto knife. So I've got the turf cut out now. I did use the X-Acto knife to score the lines, but I needed something a little beefier and I had to move to a utility knife in order to actually cut through the turf and try to get through most of the foam. So now I'm going to remove this piece of turf and then cut out the foam underneath for whatever parts I didn't get to. The nail trick worked really well. You just have to go through the corners and where the nails are positioned. You just have to go through those and kind of freehand it. So guys, here's the final product. It turned out pretty well, pretty happy with it. There was a couple lessons that I learned through the process. The first is when I made the measurements for the cutout in the putting turf, I based those measurements on the backing of the hitting strip. And I ended up having to trim some of the length off of the hitting strip to get it to fit properly because I didn't take into account the outside dimensions of the actual turf. So that's one thing you'll want to keep in mind if you're doing this process, is the outside dimensions of the turf and not just the backing dimensions. The other thing that you can see here, there's a little bit of a shadow going around the hitting strip. It's slightly raised above the putting surface. I'm a little disappointed about that. It's probably about a 1/4 inch, maybe just a little bit more raised over the surface of the putting surface. So I'm going to use it for a week or so and see if I can get used to that. If I can't and I think it's a problem, then I'll cut in the EZT Hybrid mat, the entire thing. I'll still have this hitting strip that I can replace as the hitting surface wears, but if I can't adjust to that being slightly raised, then I'll just cut in the entire hitting mat. But overall, I'd say I'm pretty pleased with how it turned out. It's very square to the target, so with regards to that, I'm really happy with the steps, and the couple little tricks that I shared during this video I think were helpful.
So that's all there is to the process. Hopefully you got some value out of this video. If you did, please hit that like button. It really does help. And please consider subscribing to the channel as well. Also, if you have any questions, please leave them below. I get back to everybody who leaves me a question or a comment. So please, if you have any questions, if I didn't cover something clearly enough, just please leave me that question and I'll get back with you just as fast as I can, and hopefully I can help. Well, guys, that's it for the Golf Nerd. Hit 'em long and straight, and I'll see you next time.